What's up guys, and welcome to another 4-player chess video. I'm Grandmaster Max Illingworth, and I had crashed down from 500, losing nearly 200 rating points in just 2 to 3 days. And I thought about quitting playing 4-player chess forever, because I felt that it was just a completely unfair game. But then I just started playing, and I don't even know why I was playing, because I hated the variant at the time I was playing it. But then suddenly I started to hit on a really effective strategy, much more effective than the one I was using before. Previously, what I was doing in 4-player chess is I was playing very defensively, mainly being paranoid at trying to stop all the opponent's threats, and then sort of letting them kill each other off, and then I would win. But what I was finding is that instead of the players who are stronger trying to kill each other off, they would instead come after me, or one of them would come after me and the other would simply win the game. So then I realized that 4-player chess solo is actually a game of kill or be killed, which means that you have to think of it from a perspective of, okay, the best way to defend against the opponents attacking you is simply to attack them first and weaken them so much that they're just not going to be in a position to attack you, and therefore you'll be able to do your thing. So you're going to see this much more aggressive approach in these games, which I think will also make the video a lot more entertaining. If you are enjoying it so far, do make sure to smash that like button and definitely consider subscribing, especially if you are new to the Illingworth Chess YouTube channel. So let's get into the first game of my little streak here. At this time, as you can see, I was rated 2-3, 2-3, and I was basically playing as to say, okay, I'm just going to play a whole bunch of games in one go as my last ever session, and I'm never going to play ever again, but we see how that turns out. It's kind of like, an addiction, like you say, this is going to be the last cigarette I'll ever smoke, or this is the last bit of alcohol I'll ever drink, and then it's like, you say it, but you kind of know, or your friends know deep down that you are going to sort of come back to it later in a sense. So anyway, so let's look at the actual game. These are all anonymous games, so while you can see the players' ratings and their names here, I didn't know what their level was at the time. So at this point I was going for my standard opening of putting the rook pawns here, which grabs some useful space for either making it harder for them to keep their king safe, or it makes my king a lot safer a lot later in the game. So both the players who's playing very standard sort of development for the most part, with some differences, like we can see that he is offering a trade of queens, and this is the start of my new approach, because the old me would have simply avoided the trade of queens, put a knight here or a bishop here, something like this. But instead I said, you know what, if he wants to trade the queens, I'm going to do it so that he is weakened. So I took and said, well, I get 9 points, and I become much less of a threat because green and red have a lot more material. So let's see how it played out. I brought my pieces out, they start doing the same. Yeah, bishop c8 is kind of weird. I think that, well, I guess he wanted to try and get his bishop out, and he didn't want to allow some en passant trade. But definitely pushing it like this would be a bit more natural, I suppose. I am talking a little bit more quickly in this video because, well, there are a lot of games to get through here. So we had a bishop going back. I pushed my pawn up, a knight moves, and okay, at this point I took here. And again, it's sort of a point where instead of being afraid of exchanges, I'm very happy to trade pieces, because we see now that he can take the knight, and this is why putting the pawn up was a mistake, because now we can only take one of the bishops at a time, so I managed to eliminate some material for my strongest flank player. So we had takes. I decided to just keep developing normally, and he moved his bishop back, and this was a nice square because he can think about maybe giving some sort of check. And so to take advantage of this idea, I considered pushing the pawn up, but I thought maybe this will be more effective a move later. But okay, he decided to castle out the check, so the guy did see that. So we had pawn up, knight here. Actually, I think this RGM Dobbs, he's a guy I ended up playing quite a few times, I think. So anyway, we had this pawn move. The reason I played this knight, by the way, is again part of my more aggressive strategy, where unlike before, I'm now very willing to sacrifice a piece in order to open up the pawn cover around my opponent's king, rather than just waiting for the opponent to try to weaken their king first, because usually I find I don't actually get around to it. So I just do a bit of the heavy lifting for them. But I don't do it just yet. I want to keep him thinking about this move, because I want him to kind of worry about it and have it limit his options later, so he's less likely to attack me if I still have a threat on him in the air. So he moves to king, so that this is not going to come with a check. Also, you're going to notice with the way the players are positioned that basically, if I were to take, he would just take back immediately, because he plays his move immediately after me. Whereas if I made a threat on red, then green would still be able to make a threat to kind of have 2 threats on the one player. So he put a pawn move, pawn up offering a trade of bishops, and actually I missed that this bishop was under attack, otherwise I would have played takes and would have made sure that we weakened him. That was an opportunity I missed because I was playing a little bit too quickly and building up some time on the clock with these very fast, solid moves. But okay, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it was a missed opportunity, but given that these two guys are strong as players, maybe it wasn't so bad in the end to have yellow weaken green a little bit as well. Because before that, green did have all the pieces on the board still. So I put my pawn up, so I'm just basically getting my structure really solid, making sure, well, this pawn's undefended, but it's not so easy to attack. But I'm making sure that for the most part, my pieces are defended. Now, the old me would have probably played some move like knight here, just desperately trying to defend everything in defense. But new me says, you know what, let's play a little more aggressively. And so I just push the pawn saying, you're not going to attack me anyway, because I'm not one of the real threats. So I just kept my piece on good squares, getting ready to start pushing these pawns. Keeping in mind, of course, that when a pawn does get to the 8th rank, then that will become a queen, and I think we will see that pretty soon, actually. Yeah, I was a bit surprised that red didn't get a new queen. It was a little bit curious to me. But he decides to kick the knight instead. I kick his bishop, again trying to work a bit with green here. And it pays off to some extent. Well, we have the queen move, and yeah, I decided to take the bishop. And the reason I take the bishop rather than the queen is that if I take his queen, I'm going to probably lose the knight. So I do lose a bit of material. And also the bishop is worth 5 points and the other queen is worth just 1. So it just works best to get the points for free and also make black more of a target because he's the only one with 2 queens. So we had to pawn up, the rook move, and I decided to attack the rook, which if I had the position again, I probably would play some move like knight here and just defend the pawn. But okay, I decided to attack the rook, and it worked out okay because green did coordinate with me and it allowed me to move the knight back and forth. While in the meantime, we did get to rid of one of the piece of the stronger player with green taking it. And yeah, I actually still have a lot of points, which is quite nice. I have the most points. And I've given up a queen and a knight, but I'm still not seen as that big of a threat. And my king position is probably the most solid of everyone here, unless red would open it later. But I'm still trying to make it hard for him to do that. And yeah, now we see the players coordinating so that one of the queens will fall. And this time I do decide to take that queen, even though it gives up the knight, because we need to sort of take red down a peg or two. And also knight g7, we see that green's quite a decent player, that he knows to coordinate with me and to keep the balance of the game. And now this is an interesting move as well, because even though yellow is not one of the main threats at the moment, I realize that red and green are going to kind of kill each other off quite a bit because they're really going after each other. So who's going to be the main threat then when yellow starts to get queens? It's going to be yellow, of course. So I play this knight sacrifice in order to undermine him so his king will be weak for the rest of the game. And so that, let's say, if red or green is left over and is really strong, then it means that yellow is reliant on me to help attack green, because his king is so weak, he's going to need me to coordinate for green not to just checkmate him. So we have these pawn moves. I decided to let this guy queen, not that I could really stop it anyway. And so we have this interesting balance of material, where I have almost basically the least material on the board, but I do have the most points, which is kind of nice. I don't have so many more points, so I'm going to get targeted by all the other guys. Also, the players' kings are all quite weak. Okay, the green king is still somewhat safe, but he did lose 1 pawn as cover, which is kind of nice for us. So I just keep everything well defended, just put the rook up, and we see that, red didn't see the checkmate threat. So now it means that green has the most material. Actually, is that true? Well, actually, red, green, and yellow have a similar amount of material, but green does have the most points, so it means that the players are not really going to go after me in general. It is true that if green was able to checkmate me, he would get 20 extra points and he would be able to claim the win. But then on the other hand, it's also true that it's very hard to get at me, and in a time it would take to get rid of me, the yellow player would become so strong that green would probably get mated first or lose too much material. So anyway, I started pushing my pawns, realizing that having learned from the current #1 in solo, Jay Bolia, who is now like 2640 something, well, I learned that the key to playing this well, and the reason he wins so many games, is because he knows when to start pushing and queening the pawns at the right time. And since I'm not really the threat, since I'm the weakest player, it is a good time for me to start getting those pawns rolling and let them go after each other, while I can maybe try and get a queen. And it is a nice move as well, where I'm just making sure that this king remains quite weak by setting up some threats, so he defends against it. But he's always going to have to worry about this, and yeah, we see that, well, there was a blunder of the white queen here. So it means that green is winning at this point. But I have these strong passed pawns, and with these pawns all being on the 6th rank, while they're only 2 moves away from queening, and yeah, he decides to get rid of the queen, I push ahead. And yeah, it ended up working well because he did take, and that means that, well, I can now show my trust by saying, well, I'm actually not going to take your rook. I'm going to just prepare to push my pawns, and I'm going to coordinate with yellow in order to take down green and make green a lot weaker. So I had this rook move, queen check, and yeah, queen check was an interesting decision because now I have the option of playing rook takes and giving a checkmate to the king with a double check. Do you think that's a good decision here? What are your thoughts? Now, if you want to think about some more, you can definitely pause the video. So I think I did actually take the mate, if I remember correctly. Yep, I did. And the reason I did this is kind of an interesting decision because on the one hand, yes, that is true that green has way more material than me, that he basically is up a knight and a queen. The reason I decided to play this is 2 reasons. One is that I'm a much stronger 2-player chess player than this guy, being a grandmaster and him being untitled. So that's one factor that's kind of in my favour. But also the position is not like an absolute ironclad win for green, because I am only 2 squares away from queening the pawn. So the fact that I'm a lot closer to queen and he is, does give me some sort of swindling chances for which I can try to outplay him at this point. Anyway, the game went pawn up, trying to stop my pawns. I just attack his queen, which probably wasn't the best decision. Maybe I should play the pawn up instead, get him to take me, and that way I can get rid of his pawn that's close to queening, attack his bishop, and also prepare to queen my pawn as well, given I only need to get the pawn on his 8th rank in order to queen, or on the H file technically speaking. But yeah, instead I played this rook move to attack the queen, and I think this was just a move to buy some time, but he handled it quite well. This queen here was a good move. And now it's very hard for me to push my pawns, whereas I have to contend with his pawns potentially becoming queens. So realizing that I have to do something direct, and also completely missing this, which was a really good idea to get a second queen, well, I have to try to change the position fast, or he's just going to win. So I sack the rook in order to get the passed pawns and ensure that at least one of my pawns is going to queen. And now I think my opponent's decision was quite a good one, where he played this rook move, giving up his rook, and in return getting rid of 2 of my passed pawns. Because I think that in this position here, after the trade of queens, which does give me 9 more points, but I think that it is a reasonable decision. He is technically winning there. And also with his king being maybe slightly less safe than mine, it does mean a trade queens probably is going to be in his favour a little bit, other than the fact I got 9 more points, which is kind of in my favour. So he does have to be a bit careful. But yeah, he plays his bishop attack, and I know, I think that it's an interesting question what he should play. Maybe a move like bishop here could have been interesting, just to try to stop me from attacking his pawn. And I think that if he's able to get his knight around, get the rook to support, I think this should still be winning. Because he is up 1 knight, and I think that will tell, along with the fact that he's got some passed pawns that are probably as good as mine. Because I need to get my pawns here in order to queen, and he's doing a pretty good job of covering all of those squares at the moment with his pieces. But yeah, instead he played the attack on the rook, which was a bit imprecise, because now I can win this one of the pawns back. And for me, I kind of start to outplay him bit by bit, where I played his pawn move. I decided to go for this rather than taking and trying to grab more pawns, because I would need to have 4 more points in order to win from this stage, and actually winning the 4 extra points when the pawn is only worth 1 and the knight is only worth 2. Well, it's not so easy, so it's better just to play for position here. So I push my passed pawn, which is only 2 squares from queening. He takes here, which is a good move. I push this pawn, wanting to think about trying to get a queen one way or the other. He tries to stop it, which is quite sensible. I bring the bishop here to cover, protecting the pawn. And yeah, this position, I think, it's hard to say whether it's still winning for him or not, because even though he's up a piece, I think that my pawns are a little bit further ahead. So it's now not so clear, and I do think with more points I might be a slight favourite to win by now. Well, he plays his knight move, which is probably not the best, because now his rook is tied up to its defence. He plays the rook here. I decide to take, yeah, I just want to take this pawn, because I couldn't really see an easy way to improve the position. In hindsight, that pawn doesn't really do anything, so maybe I should have pushed here and tried to queen this pawn. But I figured his knight and bishop were covering it anyway, so that was why I decided not to do it. But probably it was a better move. Well, I took, he played knight here, trying to sack for a pawn, which is kind of sensible. I decided to take his pawn. Maybe it would have been better for me to push, actually, just to try and queen my own pawn. but I'd forgotten that he's no longer attacking my bishop. Also, I'm probably playing too fast. I do have a 5-second increment. I've got like nearly 4 minutes on the clock. So I probably should have played a little more slowly here. Actually, I stand corrected. Maybe g5. He might have knight g3. Maybe he can try to attack or something. But, okay, I guess I can still take. And, you know, I can meet takes with queen. So I guess this is actually a good move after all. So after this, knight takes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I agree with the decision. But it's a decent one to sack a piece to stop me queening. But yeah, maybe you should think about just trying to push his own pawns, because I think that's going to be his best chance. In the end, yeah, I put my king here because I don't want to allow check and allow some mate. So he brings the rook here. And yeah, now I think that it probably should be winning for me, because I do have 20 extra points, meaning that I only need to get one more point for free and I basically win the game, meaning my opponent is not able to sacrifice anything. So I bring the rook here. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if my play was the very best, but it kind of worked out in the end, where I was able to trade off this pawn. Then trade, and now the rook ending should be winning because my pawns are a little bit further ahead than his, and that extra 2 tempi does make a pretty big difference. So he pushes his pawn up. Not sure if my moves were absolutely the most precise, but I think that they were good enough in the end. Where I just played to make sure that he wasn't going to queen, that his queening square is covered, and then now that that's covered, I can be more efficient in getting my own pawns to advance in some form with the support of the king, which is quite an important point in these late endings. That one reason I'm winning is also because my king is in a much better position to support my pawns than his. So the more active king, I think, is what makes the difference. Now after pawn up, he attacks his rook, which actually sets a little bit of a trap. Granted, I'm probably still winning by just queening one of my pawns anyway. But after rook here, now this move just makes it easy, where he can't defend these pawns anymore. And after takes, I was able to claim the win, because I now have 21 more points than the one remaining player, and he only gets 20 extra points when I resign. So I resigned, and that gave me the win, and as you can see, I gained 20 rating points from this game. Okay, let's move on to another one. Just going to do a little magic trick here. Okay, here is the next game. You can see that I'm playing with 2 players. Like, my opposite is not particularly strong, and you know, red is quite inexperienced, and yellow is also playing here. So in any case, this was a 4-minute game, and there was no increment, so just 4-0. So that means that time is going to be a factor, and being able to play faster did kind of help. Now, you can see that this is where I start to shift my approach, because I used to just go for these rook pawn moves to grab space early. But I figured, you know what, these guys may not be that strong. So you never know when some inexperienced player is going to blunder some attack here or some attack here by moving their queen's bishop. So this is sort of why I decided to switch to the fianchetto approach. And then I decided to push the rook's pawn only when his knight moves, so I don't have to worry about some attack like knight here and knight takes to weaken my king. And also, you never know when I'll be able to take at a moment where maybe here takes a knight, and where basically the white will, or rather yellow will have to give up a piece if that sort of thing happens. So already yellow has to be a little bit careful if he were to push here or something. So I just develop normally, kind of keeping my options open. One disadvantage of this approach is, let's say if my opponent had played this pawn move instead, it would be kind of hard for me to find a good square for my queen, because pawn up would leave this to be taken, and pushing the pawn up here would leave this bishop to be taken. So that would have been a move that would be a lot more annoying for me. And I guess I could put pawn up to deal with the pressure this way, maybe. It was one alternative approach we wanted to make it harder for me. But because it was another anonymous game, all these games being anonymous, he didn't know that I was, you know, a 2-300 plus solo player. So anyway, we see that, well, that red gets his queen, but now there's an attack here that's kind of annoying. And so I decide to say, okay, I'm ready to coordinate with green and start making some attacks happen. So the pawn went up. He decided to attack here, where he didn't want to give up his own queen, which I think is kind of understandable. He didn't want to part with a queen, even if it's not such a bad move in reality, because we will be able to coordinate together. You know, something like takes, I'm going to be able to check. And then he can check, and the king is kind of going on a little merry-go-round there. So it would be possible to play that to really weaken red a lot, but it does take a lot of trust from green to give up his queen. And what he did actually kind of worked better in a way, where after queen here, I took his pawn. So then after this, he took, and now we see that, yeah, this is just really bad for red. By getting his queen early and promoting, not only did he lose a lot of time with development, but he also just made himself a target, meaning that when green and blue go after him, then he just becomes too weak. It's very surprising he didn't take the bishop. You know, maybe he was just rage quitting us at this point, I don't know. But it would have been the best try, given that there is, after all, an attack on this bishop. So he definitely would still be in the fight here, all things considered. But yeah, instead he just blunders the queen. I thought, okay, I'm going to take the 9 points, thank you very much. And now then this guy goes after, and I think this is just perfect, where green has been weakened, red is virtually out of the picture, so my king will be very safe on the queen side. And then we'll be able to work together to team against green, who right now, team against yellow rather, who right now green really hates because yellow just took 2 of the pieces. So now all the psychology is kind of working in my favor as well. Yeah, here I made some blunder at some point. Can't remember where, but it was a bit later, I think. Or I might be thinking of another game. But anyway, I decide to play this move, and you see now this is really well timed because this knight's under attack, this one's under attack, so it means that yellow is no longer going to have all the pieces on the board. He's going to lose at least a knight, and that's going to bring the material more to balance, where I have as much material as yellow, and I even have a little more points. Yeah, this was a point where the game gets really crazy. If I'd known what was coming, I probably would have played some move like just rook here or something, but I guess I didn't want to allow him to take my pawn. So I played pawn here. This guy pushes the pawn up, and I think, okay, green, we're working together, so you're not going to take the bishop. Your opponent's going to move the queen, and the game's going to go on. But then he takes me, and at this point I was just out for blood, like, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that green loses. Which is one reason why you shouldn't really take the opposites piece in general, unless they're in a position where they can't punish you at all, because it could come back to haunt you. Because I do have enough pieces where I'm still in a good spot, and can still hurt green later. So I took here, continuing the plan of weakening yellow, making sure his king is weaker. Given that yellow does have the most material, I think it's the right decision to play against him for now. Green decides to go after him, and I said, you know what, I'll forgive you. Let's work together and take out green. I'll take out yellow. But then green starts to do some really crazy things. Yeah, red just rage quits because he's sick of playing. I mean, he probably would lose, but he could definitely try to make a fight of it and try to annoy my rook to try to coordinate with yellow. So if it was a high-level game, he'd still have a shot. But yeah, I went for this, and this is where the game started to get really crazy at some point. Yeah, I took here, and my idea was that after he takes it, I'm giving green a 30-point checkmate, which I think he should absolutely take. Although I guess actually I can understand why he didn't take it. Because, yeah, I mean, I will be able to take his queen, and I'll have so much material left over. He'll have 30 points, I'll have 29, but I'll be way up in material. So in actuality, my rook c5 is probably a mistake, and I should simply bring the knight back. The one good thing about taking, though, is it does make the yellow a lot weaker. So it does mean that it'll be much easier for green to attack him, and therefore it's less likely he'll go after me. So it did have some benefits in that regard, even though it was in some ways a mistake. But okay, I bring my knight back, and well, my king is reasonably safe even in the center, covered by these pawns, because I've weakened yellow so much it's very hard for him to go after me. And also, green is just so far away, it's hard for him to attack me as well. So now we do what typically happens when one of the flank players dies. Well, it sort of sucks for yellow because it's much harder for him to queen a pawn when he's sort of getting in the thick of blue and green. But for us guys, it's really easy. We can push our pawns on the flank where red was with no real interference. And okay, it's true that because we're both doing it, that neither of us are going to queen our pawns just yet. And also, a nice thing about putting the rook's pawns, it also gives you ideas of being able to do a rook lift and get the rook into the game without needing to necessarily give up a pawn to do so, which is quite nice. So we had knight move, king up, rook here. So that's sort of one thing I like to do that's a somewhat unique element. And the way I play 4-player chess is doing these active rook lifts in order to bring my rook into the game. It's considered a beginner kind of idea, obviously in normal chess, unless it's done like in some very specific middle games. But in 4-player chess, I find it often works well. I played this rook move because I was nervous he might try some takes and maybe try to set up some kind of checkmate on me. So I just made sure that wasn't going to happen. He takes this knight, so that's good for me that he's weakening green a lot. So then we have takes. So yeah, I do lose the pawn, which is not really ideal, but I think it's a small price to pay for, for not losing, not getting mated. So okay, I bring the rook back saying, okay, if you want to go after me, I'll go after you. So I'm showing that I'm willing to work with both the players. So in a sense, they neither of them want to kind of kill me just yet. I mean, in fairness, if yellow could checkmate me, that extra 20 points would win the game. But he just doesn't really have the material to make it happen. So he brings the queen here, thinking about attacking me. And now I have to decide who am I going to play for. Am I going to try and stop this guy getting another queen? Well, it turns out the bishop's already covering it. So I decide to play this knight move and just make sure that my king is really well protected. And yeah, yellow now starts to commit suicide in a really weird way. So I take. He plays this just giving up the queen, which is a very peculiar move. Actually, it's sort of funny. This guy, yeah, he sort of was really annoyed at me for like sort of being very angry when losing due to some very irrational players, basically throwing to make sure another player wins, but they lose as well. And then he sort of starts to do the same thing a little bit in this, which is kind of funny. Oh, to be fair, the only person it really hurts is himself at this point. Like, it doesn't exactly give me or give green automatic win by any means. But I do get some extra points, which is nice. So he gets the queen. And I take thinking, okay, the rational play for yellow is to take the queen, because this guy has 2 queens, and, well, it's just going to be really nasty if he has 2 queens. But instead he takes my rook, and I think, okay, this is just crazy. So he had taken, I take the rook because it's better to get rid of him. And yeah, at this point, I mean, I was pretty sure that, okay, this guy has 2 queens, surely we're just going to lose now. But then some really weird things started happening in this game, and it started to go from, like, being tragic to just being funny. So yeah, it's true that definitely, well, yellow played very irrationally in this game, basically playing only to make green win and to make himself lose in the process, which is not a very good way to play. But yeah, the game started to get kind of funny when I did this queen check. I'm not sure if it was a good decision necessarily. It does mean that green does get 50 points. So one advantage it has is that, well, he has more points, and it means that green doesn't get the checkmate, because if green got the checkmate, he would win very easily. But yeah, I guess it's hard to say whether it's the right move or not. I don't see a way to really checkmate him myself. So yeah, I think this was not so bad, even though it gives another player checkmate. Because this guy, yeah, he gets mated anyway. So now at this point, this is where I think, okay, this guy has so much more material that sure, I'm just going to lose. He's just going to check me with the queens. I'm just going to get mated. Actually, he missed a mate in 2 here. He could have played queen up, and yeah, then I have to block with the queen, and then this is just mate. So I was sure I was going to lose this game, and I was about to like say some very choice words for yellow for being a very incompetent player. But instead, yeah, this craziness started happening where, yeah, he doesn't take my queen. Like, he has 1 more queen, so he should just trade off my 1 queen. He gets more points as well in the process, and yeah, it just is a trivial win. But yeah, then he decides to do some weird stuff, like he starts to, instead of trading his 1-point queen, he trades his 9-point queen. And I go, okay, if he's going to make this decision, maybe I have a glimmer of hope. Keep in mind, this is also a 4-minute game. He only has 39 seconds with no increment. So he basically has to checkmate me in this time. And I mean, he could do something very easy, like he could almost just, defend his rook, put everything on a light square so that my bishop can't attack it, pre-move this pawn move to get another queen at some way, and then he'll just checkmate me very easily. Like, he can pretty much pre-move his way to victory. But then he starts to play really slowly, and it kind of helps I do annoying things like attack his rook to slow him up. So yeah, he blunders the rook, and I think, okay, now I have a little bit of hope. If I can get another queen, then I have an outside chance to maybe swindle him. So I start pushing my passed pawn. He gets the same idea, but now it's a little bit late. And yeah, you can see he's just spending way too much time on his moves. So I don't know if he had some lag or something, but yeah, now I get a queen, and basically just a matter of not falling for some sort of checkmate here. So I played as attacking, and yeah, he just has no time to defend, or no time to do anything. I gave him some checks to run his time on the clock, and yeah, he loses on time. And I get this incredibly lucky win. Though in fairness, the only reason it was lucky is because yellow was absolutely out to get me. And it's funny, like, he basically, yellow after he said, lol, you gotta find a soul in 1 minute, GR. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of the thing that, yeah, if he had focused on targeting green, I think that yellow actually would have had a decent chance to win the game, because I would have been very happy to coordinate with him and help him to undermine green as such. But yeah, instead he tried to give the win to green, but I won anyway. And sometimes it's the most satisfying win when somebody does everything in their power to make you lose, and you still manage to win anyway. There's something definitely satisfying about that. Okay, let's move on to another game here. Just give me a moment to bring it up. So, okay, this one. Okay, I guess you kind of know that this is going to be a win, but for me, because, yeah, I don't like to show my losses so much in general. I prefer to show the games where I actually played well and showed some really good play, like how to play solo rather than how not to play it, because I think you get plenty of examples how not to play it from the way that some of my opponents will handle the positions in any case. So anyway, with this one, yeah, this was kind of a weird game. Obviously, I didn't know who the players were. It was anonymous. It was a flat 4 minute, so I just played very quickly playing the flag, as well as to play some good moves and get some points. So let's see, yeah, he's stopping me playing my usual opening, which is quite sensible. Although it is true that probably this might have been more natural, because that way that space is kind of more handy in it. You do want to usually castle to your right rather than to your left. But okay, he sort of probably sensed I might be a good player, whereas this guy playing here is obviously not like going to be a top player, where he's pushing the pawn 2 squares, not 1. unless it's someone trying to like pretend they're not a good player. So anyway, I play this move, and this is a bit of a unique sort of strategy where I say, you know what, I'm going to toy with him and maybe try to do some knight here and be annoying. So yeah, black, or rather green decides to Fiend Kettle opening. I don't bring my queen out just yet because I see that this guy's not really coordinating with me. But now I decide to take, and there's one of these long-term sacks that, depending on how the game turns out, it could be brilliant or it could be terrible. I think it's a really good idea because especially if he had played the bishop here, okay, he's only 2-1-10, so I guess that's why I didn't see it. Well, then he wouldn't be able to take because then that would be checkmate. So it turns out my knight move was a really good move, especially if he coordinates. But even with red being a bit weak and not really coordinating, actually it's not such a bad move, I think. Because it turns out that his king is weakened in the long term. Also, with the way he's played it, takes him a long time to castle this way. So I think it was a reasonable decision, all things considered. It also makes me less of a target as well. Thankfully, he didn't take this pawn, which would have been incredibly annoying. But maybe he decided he didn't want to antagonize me any further. I guess I would get an open file in return, but I don't think it would be worth it. Because my king would just be very weak for the rest of the game. Because when he goes for this fianchetto here, you can kind of see that, well, it's very hard for me to do my usual b6 and get the king castled. Especially since when green takes me, then it means that blue will have a move to attack me as such. So that would have put me in a very bad position. Yeah, maybe this pawn move might have been a bit better, but I decided, you know what, let's just defend the pawn in advance and maybe keep up this move as an option for later if he puts the king on this side. Yeah, he plays his king move because he realized that this was going to be kind of a threat. And actually, if red had played some attacking move against green, I would have been happy to coordinate with him, probably. But yeah, he goes for this, and yeah, I decide to attack here, saying, come on, red, let's work together and take down blue. So we have knight here, because blue does have the most material at the moment. I guess red does as well, but yeah, now I decide to attack this guy, thinking, let's keep both of them honest. This king move is probably a mouse slip. I think he probably meant to play queen here and maybe bring the king this way, because that's going to be a lot safer to put the king on this area. Because if I do take, his rook is going to get active. So his king is reasonably safe, even with my pawn still being here. But instead, yeah, he decides to put the king up, which is very weird. And I took advantage of it by giving him a check. He makes his pawn move that does weaken his king a bit. And yeah, now I start to take, just trying to coordinate a bit with the guy. Because it also gives him some time to attack. And yeah, now the game gets kind of funny that, you know, I'm hitting his bishop and I'm hitting this knight. So it leads to an interesting outcome where we have this move. So he decides not to allow this with a check, but instead to play the knight move and let me to take the bishop and also to go after this guy as well. Now, probably his best move is to move the knight, because if I take his rook, he at least gets the bishop, and definitely, if you get rid of both of my bishops, that makes me a much less dangerous adversary in the long term, especially later in the game. It also makes it much harder for me to keep my king safe. But yeah, instead he goes here and just lets me take a free piece. Now, it would have been very interesting to play a move like bishop takes, actually, because in that case, I probably wouldn't want to trade the bishops that way, but then he could also maybe even try to weaken this guy as well, potentially. So that way it would have really taken the threat off a couple of players. But yeah, I decided just to play normally. I took the knight. We had the pawn go up. Pawn up, and yeah, he's trying to get some attack going. And that's why I decided to be very ruthless and basically say, I'm going to play just to get rid of one of the players. So that way we can get to a free player situation where my king is going to be safe. So he takes my bishop, which I don't know if it was the best decision. I think you should just try to run the king away from me. Make it less of an incentive for me to attack you, so I'm then more likely to go after blue. But now I have a lot of incentive to attack, saying, okay, green is indicating he wants to go after me, so let's now make sure that he goes down first. So that's why I played this rook move, which doesn't tell some level of trust, but okay, otherwise he can think about checking me, which would be annoying. And also I kind of figured that blue is probably not going to play knight f6 and give up a knight in order to save his buddy here, or to save his opposite, because then he'd have, well, I guess he'd have the similar amount of material to red. So I think it would have been a good decision for him to do this to keep some more balance in the game, because then green would kind of feel a bit indebted to blue in some ways. But yeah, instead he doesn't play it in a team's way, and I think that wasn't the best decision. Anyway, I decided to bring my king to safety, because obviously my king is a lot safer on this side, even though green will have Fury can attack me before blue can, on the way the order of the moves is played, you know, green, red, blue, yellow. Well, it turns out that he has very few pieces to attack me, so it kind of makes sense to put this king on a safe spot. It shows another advantage as well of making green very weak, and it gives me a much safer spot for the king for later, even without the bishop to defend here. So after rook knight, yeah, the player's doing some weird moves. I feel like red and blue are just targeting each other, but they don't really know what to do. So they just try to play solid. And okay, in defense of blue, actually, this idea of creating another queen is, I think, quite a sensible move, because he doesn't have many points. He needs to rely on getting more material to get some points later. So realizing that, I said, you know what, let's play to weaken his king even more. So that even if blue does get a lot of queens later, which does seem like it could be quite possible with these passed pawns, well, it means that his king is quite weak. So it means that, well, red and I will be able to target him later. So I bring my queen up, and I think this ends up being quite a long game, actually. So I'm going to fast forward past some bits of it. We have this phase where basically we decide to work together. That is red and I work together to basically get rid of green. And at this point, I think that green just was very angry. Obviously, 1500, this was his first game of solo. And now he's getting teamed on by us in a way that, okay, it's not very fair, but who said that life was fair? And after thinking for nearly 2 minutes, he decides to defend this pawn. Probably a good decision, and I'm a bit surprised that he didn't decide to go here and try to at least weaken me in some way, because it's all pretty obvious it's going to be like a 2v1 where probably we're going to go after blue in a way, just because he's kind of closer. Obviously, it's a long way for me to go and attack Red. But yeah, this game was had some really weird elements to it. So okay, I bring my rook here, and the reason I play this, I want to be ready to weaken Red's king, because at the moment Red's king is very safe, meaning that blue doesn't have a lot of incentive to team with me later in the 2v1 stage. Also, I did see that this guy was about to lose on time. It was quite fortunate I have this checkmate, where it is worth, I think, giving up the queen to get the 20 points, because it leaves me so far ahead that it's kind of an interesting situation where, on the one hand, okay, he decides not to take the queen. I think that he should probably have taken my queen, actually, because even though in theory I could team against red, I have very few pieces to do so, and I'm a very long way from him. Like, I can get rid of his bishop, but even then, like, it's still, he'd be the favorite to win. So I think he should have just taken my queen, tried to checkmate me, and then I think that would have given him the best chance. But fortunately for me, he decided to be my buddy and not mate me. And then he decides to blunder the queen instead, which is just great. And one thing you're going to see me do quite well, and I'm not going to spend too much time like going to talk about individual moves, because otherwise we would be here for an hour. But you'll see that I do a quite good job of keeping the balance of the game. You also notice I actually don't take his bishop straight away, but I'm trying to wait until blue makes some kind of threat so that I can try to take that bishop for free if possible. Because now it's a little bit dangerous. If he can take this pawn and create a queen, my king could very easily get mated down this file. Well, I could block with a knight, but then I'm weakened on this diagonal, so it would be a really bad outcome if he opens that file. But I don't think he really gets around to it. And yeah, this is a move that was really well timed, where I waited for him to attack here, so that way I can try to get the bishop for free, or if he takes, well then, at least I managed to get rid of a lot of red's material, and now blue has such a big material advantage that red is kind of forced to coordinate with me to have a chance of winning the game. It is true in theory he could just play against me to try to make me lose, but then that would mean that blue would have so much material that he would lose as well. Unfortunately, because red is a 2-100 player and therefore not a completely irrational solo player, it meant that we were actually able to work together, so I was able to take his rook. Yeah, he decided not to team. Like, I would have been quite happy for him to try to attack me like this, to attack his queen. But I guess he would have taken my pawn, which in some ways I think I actually would prefer him to take my knight to taking my pawn. Because when he takes my pawn, I have no good blocker on this diagonal. And I think that if he had taken here, well, he probably just wins the game just by mating my king and then finishing off red. But yeah, fortunately he decided to go for the points. In some ways, it's understandable when I have 62 points. Like, it's very close to a point where it's not at the point where I can resign and basically just win, but it's getting to that level where I don't need to get that many more points to actually win the game. So, okay, let's see how it played out. I decided to push the pawn because I think that allowing this with tempo would be annoying. And now, yeah, if he wanted, he could have actually played this queen move here, but it's a lot of trust then to have him not take the queen, and I think that red would have probably taken the queen. So I think it was the right decision not to trust red, but to try to weaken him. And yeah, around this point we get this weird situation where, yeah, I sort of play like I'm teaming a little bit with blue, pretending to be just like some irrational weak player. But then he puts the queen on pre, and I think if he didn't put the queen on pre, I think that blue would probably win this game, because I don't think that red and I combined have enough to really overthrow blue in this sort of position without some extremely precise coordination. And I don't think it would happen in the 4-minute game with no increment. But yeah, we've all been playing fairly fast, and yeah, he blunders us the queen, so he probably played a bit too fast. And yeah, now he decides to stop this pawn queening, So I said, okay, let's now team against red and weaken red a bit. And again, I'm doing this to try to make red dependent on me for help. I don't want him to get to a position where he's so strong, where he's strong enough that he can sort of work with blue to sort of beat me. So that's why I'm actually doing the thing where I'm actually targeting the other weak player rather than this, because I want to sort of weaken him enough that that he needs me to beat blue. So it's true that, yeah, if from a purely rational perspective, it wouldn't work ideally, but with irrational players, it seems to work well. Because I kind of know, in a sense, that, well, I can trust he's probably not going to play rook here and give him the checkmate, because then basically, well, blue will just be able to claim the win. So I'm kind of using the fact that red can't really team with blue very much to my advantage here. So yeah, we have some moves like for a trade at queens, because if the queens get traded, it gets me that much closer just being able to just resign and win, because they won't be able to get enough points to beat one another. Yeah, this is a very annoying move going after this pawn, and honestly I didn't miss it. But I remember I was just so paranoid that he would give some check and I would just lose. But it was not really a rational fear. So I push my pawn, he takes my pawn, and now I move one square away from queening, so at least that gives me potential to get some material to maybe compete with blue a bit. Now I play this move defending everything here. Admittedly, this was probably a more solid move in retrospect. But okay, this at least is more active, which means that it looks like I'm working to help with red. And yeah, at this point, yeah, this is not ideal. It is true that my king is kind of weak. After he takes, he has all his idea of just checkmating the king. So now I need a little bit of a miracle here, and I decide to queen the pawn, because it's the only way I can really stop him queening. And I'm putting a lot of faith that red is not going to take my queen, because if he takes my queen, I get mated. And then basically, even though he would get my queen, well then there would just be so many points for blue that it would just be a win. So we had a lot of moves played. This is quite a long game. I think it's, wow, it's like 119, so a really long game. But then we have this maneuvering phase, and I'm going to skip really fast past this, because not a lot really happens for a very long time. I just basically play to make sure that I'm not the obvious target, where if they target me, I have to give up a queen or give up a lot of material, and basically lose to the player that's left if they get me. And yeah, this was a really nice idea, playing for this check, and it basically forced me to sack the queen in order to not get mated with this sort of thing. So this was very good play by blue. And yeah, now we get a situation where, you know, blue has the most material, but on the other hand, also, he has a lot less points than me. So it's one of these cases where I'm not quite in a position where I can resign, I think, because, well, we have like 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, like 37 extra points that he can get along with my king. So yeah, I'm a long way from being in a position where I could just resign and claim the win. I just have to play it out and hope that it works in my favor. Unfortunately, I didn't have my queen in a position for a checkmate, but okay, I can at least try and set a few things up and make it look like maybe I'm going to work with blue one day, even though in reality I'm not going to. So we have this. This probably wasn't a great move because it kind of dissuades him from taking the pawn. But anyway, he does take the pawn anyway, which was a good move. Actually, to some extent, it does kind of encourage him because then he's attacking my queen. So it makes it look like he's hurting both of us at once, which is kind of what I was aiming for. Thankfully, he didn't play this bishop move here, which would have really weakened my king a lot. He decided he wanted to go after blue, and that kind of worked pretty well. So yeah, I take this pawn, trying to go after this this thing here one day. So yeah, we have this maneuvering once again, like not a lot really happening. I'm just trying to make sure that he doesn't have a good check. Okay, he could have checked me, but I guess it doesn't do that much if I just bring the king back. So yeah, I'm in a position where I have enough material to kind of save myself, but not really enough material to kind of do anything aggressive. I don't want to push my pawns yet, because that's just going to weaken my king to attack. So I basically just have to move back and forth and hope that one of them will blunder. It's not the most entertaining thing that you're ever going to see, but that's often the way to win at high-level 4-player solo. Just be very patient, just keep the game going, wait for him to get tired and make some big mistake, and just hope for the best. Now here I was very lucky that he didn't play this checkmate, because I only got 55 points. On the other hand, I guess in that case he will take, and yeah, he can't claim the win, because then, well, red would get 48 points and I'd still have the most points. And with him having more material, it would actually be a win for me. So yeah, I'm incredibly lucky that he didn't, that he didn't go for the mate. I guess he could have played the rook here maybe, unless I allow some other forced mate, which I'm not seeing. I mean, I guess he has this mate, but he would still win on material. So yeah, I think rook here would have actually won the game for him, or at least it would have been a better move. Instead he tries to push the pawns, and that really hurts him now, because now the red king is a lot weaker. And so we get this weird situation where, yeah, on the one hand, it is true that, green still has the most, or rather blue still has the most material. This move is kind of weird, but I guess I want to have some hope for some sort of checkmate, or to at least tie up his bishop. Like, I was hoping I would somehow have some move where I could force a mate on his king, but I don't quite have it at this point. So anyway, I bring the queen back. I decide, okay, let's just let green go after, blue go after red, since he's figured out, okay, this is the main target, but not a very rational decision. So he brings the queen here, and yeah, this was the blunder. Or actually, I missed this. I could have taken it, would have been checkmate. Okay, yeah, I would have just won so easily. I know I just didn't see this. I think I just played it too fast, or I just had laser focus on this guy. But yeah, that was a kind of embarrassing miss. And yeah, so it means the game goes on way longer than it should. And yeah, we have this case where the players are kind of teaming on me, which is actually what they should be doing. Kind of surprising, actually, that he didn't play this move like bishop here or something. Because then, I mean, he can take, and I think that, well, in that case, blue would probably win. Thankfully for me, he didn't see that, and he sort of gave me the time to, do a check. And the game just becomes really weird. I played this move, which... yeah, this was kind of a mistake. I was sort of hoping that he would take and then we'd get enough material to win. But it sort of worked out okay because it sort of kept the balance where, you get this situation where somehow, like it's a crazy time scramble. You see there's very little time on the clock for the players. I was very lucky he played this pawn move because otherwise I wouldn't be able to bring my king up and try to avoid the checks. And then we have this check and he decides to take this pawn. Like it's just completely random at this point. Actually, I'm a bit surprised he doesn't have some sort of checkmate. I thought he might try and go after this. But I guess, yeah, he didn't want red to be a threat. So, yeah, it just gets really insane. I guess so I managed to queen a pawn. Okay, I'm wrong here, he takes. And, yeah, then he doesn't take the queen. Like, they're just sheer time scramble. And it's at the stage where, yeah, green is, or our blue is about to lose on time. And I'm just moving this king randomly, just hoping to flag. That's the only thing I can go for. And, I mean, normally speaking, like, if red just pre-moves everything, he would beat me easily, I think. Or maybe that's not true, because I think even getting the 2 extra kings wouldn't be enough to win. You need to get the queen as well to win the game, because I have so many points. It's like the sort of saying that when you're late in the game, whoever has the most points to late endgame basically wins. And that's kind of what we see here, where somehow, yeah, even though blue is completely winning, he just doesn't have the material or the time to finish off red. I'm just moving my king randomly, trying not to flag. And yeah, by some sheer miracle, I managed to win this game. So yeah, this was very lucky, like definitely a lot of things went my way. It was a bit of a crazy game, but somehow I managed to just play faster than my opponents and win. Now, to be fair, it is true, like the move lot earlier, I missed this maiden one that was really embarrassing because it would have just won very easily. But I ended up getting very lucky and still winning anyhow. So yeah, that was this game. Let's see what the next one is on the list here. Just going to... I just realized, like, I was talking for so long in this video and like it was paused and somehow I forgot to unpause it. So it's kind of a little bit awkward. But okay, actually this is a very good moment to show the game, in fact. Because, well, this is sort of a key moment where I think that if green makes the right decision here, he has a very good chance of probably winning it at the end. But he makes a mistake and basically loses. Now, I think the move he should play here is... what would be your move here? So I think the correct decision here is to basically try to finish me off and play this move of takes here. Now, why would you take this way? It's because you give red a lot of incentive now to take my queen. Because now he has 50 points, and it means that, well, I'm going to take this queen. So green might lose 1 queen, but he weakened me quite a lot. And also he can play moves like bring the knight up, or even moving the rook if he wants to keep the rook safe. But I don't think that it's in red's best interest to take it and weaken his king anyway. But he can play moves like knight here. Wait up and discovered a check on my king, and then queen is pawn. And I think that even though he has the least points, he has so much material, and his king is so weak that it'll kind of force me to coordinate with him in order to take down red, as long as I'm not being vengeful, which I probably wouldn't be in all fairness, because it was a good play. So I think that that would have given him the win, but instead he goes after red immediately. But the problem is that now, it's not in my interest to take, because then me and green and red combined, we're not going to really be able to take down him. So since red has been working me a long time, well, actually I decided to backstab and take here. So in one sense, actually, getting rid of this was not such a bad move, but I think that getting rid of me would have been more worthwhile, because red doesn't have that many points anyway, and my king is a lot safer, which definitely counts for a lot here. Anyway, in the further course of the game, I sort of was able to balance it, so I was able to kind of team with these people at the right time when it was in my best interest. So now I play this rook move, and this basically saying I want to work with you, green, so that if he takes, you can get the knight. But instead he plays this move basically to try to make me have a lot less material. It's a little bit of a selfish move. In one way, maybe not that bad of a move in one sense, because it does weaken me a bit. But now I've also made red so weak that he basically needs me to help him win. I decided to play this knight move, making sure that my pawn structure is protected. Again, with having the 4 pawns around my king really is a big help and really disincentivizes green to some extent from committing fully to the attack on me, because then if he does that, it would mean that red would win. Red defends his knight, I defend my pawn from attack. It doesn't mean I lose this pawn and this guy can try to queen, but the way that green is playing it, he's also giving me a lot of incentive to go after him, which is not really something he should necessarily be doing. So I offer a trade of queens, and I don't think he should have taken it, because it still keeps the balance of the game, because we have the most material of the 2 players, and also brings me closer to material with red. So I think that a trade of queens, I don't know if he should have done it. I feel like it worked for me better than it worked for him. Anyway, we had a pawn push. This guy's 1 square from queening. This guy's trying to queen the pawn himself. And now I'd say, okay, let's let you guys kill each other off. And it worked really well, because at the moment I have the least material, but I also have more pawns, and my pawn's doing a really good job of guiding the king. So the fact I kind of have the most king safety, I think, is a big reason that I was able to eventually win this game. So, and also they're kind of trading off each other's pieces, so it just makes me stronger and stronger, even though red has more points. His king is so weak, and his 2 pawns are not in a position to queen, so it just puts me in a very good position to win. So he takes, I stop him queening, which I think is a very good move. And now we have this balance at this point where red has the most points, I have the most material. Well, actually, technically, green has more material, but he's kind of in a more vulnerable position because he's the flank to me and to red. So he defends, red goes after me for some reason, so he decides to go after green. So now I just basically play to let them kill each other off, sort of gambling that he's not going to take here. It's a pretty big gamble, because he probably should take my pawn in all fairness, but he decides to focus on green, and that's definitely a big power that helps me win. I can sort of see with the beautiful diamond structure, I'm now protecting checks from all different angles. Okay, it's true, if you're a diagonal check would hurt me, but there's no light squared bishops on the board, and it's unlikely that one of them is going to get a queen to check. So it's a super safe position for my king. I make sure to avoid any exchanges, and while these guys are going at it after each other, I just start pushing my material. And yeah, this is a very interesting decision as well, where it's another point where if he takes me, on the one hand, it does give this red a lot more material, but it kind of puts in a position where both of us are forced to team against red. So he decides not to trade. He puts the knight in. Yeah, this is another decision that's also quite interesting, where on the one hand, it's true that I am making this green player so strong that he's a huge favourite to win after the trade of rooks. On the other hand, it also makes me more competitive on points, so it means that, well, red kind of is forced to coordinate with me to have a chance of winning. Like, he has to move the knight and hope that there's going to be some fluke mate. So I don't know if this rook trade was objectively the best. Like, on the one hand, it does mean my pawn is only 2 steps away from queening, so it does give me some decent swindling chances to try to just push my pawns. And, you know, if red basically now is kingmaker, if he stops green's pawns, I'm going to win. If he stops my pawns, probably green will win. And we see what happens where, yeah, he decides not to take my pawn, figuring that time is of the essence in this pawn race. And yeah, this knight move is probably the decisive mistake. In one sense, it basically ensures that, that I win and not green. If he had played this move like king up instead, let's say, well, then if I push the pawn, he probably pushes his pawn. And we kind of see that, well, he's just stopping my pawns from queening. And also, I think that he will probably be able to get in time, like he can sack here. And, you know, in that case, I mean, actually, he shouldn't give a check because he wants him to have the time to take. But, you know, he could do something like this, take, pawn up. And then, you know, basically in that case, we would see that green would win. But in this kingmaker situation, he decides to give me the win instead. Thank you very much, red, for, you know, giving me the win, being a very good opposite. Maybe you're thinking along the lines of, like, you know, 4-player chess, where the theory is that if, let's say, you're in a kingmaker situation, then you sort of try to make your opposite win, or the player who kind of played a lot better to win. So he says, okay, you know what, yellow kind of played the best game, so if I can't win, let's make it that he wins. So now he goes after my queen, but I play it so that at least, you know, green loses his rook, again, keeping the balance of power. He takes my pawn. I'm not sure if he should take my pawn. Maybe he should actually try to queen his pawns, because I think we're still in a race situation where I think that with 3 pawns, that he actually has a good shot, especially if red works with our green. But instead, yeah, they do this sort of thing, and I'm able to get my pawns going faster. So now my pawns are a little bit faster than green's, which really helps a lot. And yeah, this was sort of the turning point where I think that Well, I mean, again, it's a kingmaker situation. If red plays this move and sacks his knight for my pawn, he's going to, this guy's going to give a check. These pawns are going to queen one way or the other. Probably sacks his bishop for my pawn and basically green wins. Instead, red decides in a kingmaker situation. Keep in mind, of course, that this is only 5 minutes flat for the whole game. It's not a lot of time for the players. Well, he decides to give me the win. And yeah, I could get a queen, but I thought these guys can still coordinate with each other. If I take first, I'll still be able to queen later, but it's not going to allow the bishop and knight to coordinate to attack me and try to take all my pieces. So it just keeps that balance again, and, I'm able to set up so that I'm able to queen. And actually, even though he gets a queen, it turns out that, well, I get the extra 20 points, and with the extra material and also the extra points, well, I basically just win easily. And yeah, I just claim the win at this stage because I have over 20 points more than the rest. So yeah, that was this game. This was quite a very up and down game. One where definitely, it was quite balanced. I think the players did play quite well. It might be seen to be very harsh and very critical of players may play very badly, but by the same notion of being outspoken, I also am very open and saying if someone plays well, I say it was a good game. The players played a good quality. I think that was one of these sort of games that you do get when you have like all 2,000 plus. Actually, not entirely true. A lot of the old 2,000 plus games still have a lot of very irrational and bad play. But this one, it's sort of hard to point to like that many big blunders, in fact. So yeah, it was a well-played game and a hard-fought win for me, where in the end, red decided to give me the win rather than give it to green. So that was really nice. Do we have time to go through one more game? Let's have a look and let's see. Yeah, one thing actually I didn't point out, but I guess you see on the screen, is that this actually a game that got me back over 2,400. I think what I might do is I might divide this into like different parts, where rather than just going through all the games in one go, because there are a lot of games here that I won. What I'm going to do is for the games where I went from 2,400 to 2,500, I think that makes a good topic for another video. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll sort of cover it in different parts, like from the, 2,300 to 2,400, then 2,400 to 2,500, which might not be 2 parts actually, because I did have 2 games in that streak where I did lose, but I managed to win a lot later and got me back to, back to being, at the time I'm recording this, I'm number 4 on the solo chess ranked on 4-player chess. It's nice to be back in a position where I feel at least is somewhat indicative of my actual strength. So yeah, with that being said, glad you guys liked the video. If you got this far, do make sure to leave a comment below with your feedback. And if you haven't already, do make sure to like the video. Definitely consider subscribing. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Get out of here.